The sun rose slowly over the small town, brushing the rooftops with a soft golden light. The streets were quiet, except for a few early risers who opened their shops, swept their porches, and nodded to familiar faces. In a little house on the edge of town, a girl stood by the window, watching the world come alive. She often liked these early moments. When everything was still and calm, she felt she could dream without anyone telling her what was possible and what wasn't. Her world was small. Everyone in the town knew each other. People grew up, got simple jobs, married someone from the same place, and spent their lives doing what everyone else did. No one really left. No one chased anything bigger. And when someone even talked about it, people would smile and shake their heads like it was a nice joke. But deep inside, she wanted something different. She wanted to be someone people would remember, not because she followed the same path, but because she dared to step away from it. She didn't speak much about it because she already knew what people would say. She had heard it before. That's not for people like us. Be smart. Don't waste your time on dreams. You're only setting yourself up for disappointment. Those words had become a background noise she couldn't escape. Every day, she walked through the town square and past the same faces. Some were kind to her. They smiled, asked how her family was doing, and reminded her to stay humble. Others barely noticed her, but all of them, even the kind ones, shared the same way of thinking. No one from their little town ever went far. Her school was small too. Teachers did their jobs, but they didn't talk about big dreams either. They taught enough to get by, enough to prepare everyone for a simple life. But she always stayed behind after class. While everyone else rushed out to meet friends or go home, she lingered by the window looking at the books on the shelf, the ones no one really opened. She would pick one quietly, flip through the pages, and let her imagination run wild. She imagined standing somewhere far away, doing something that people here would call impossible. She didn't know exactly how or when. She only knew that this feeling inside her wouldn't go away no matter how much the world around her tried to shrink it. One evening, she sat outside on the old wooden steps in front of her house. The sky was painted orange, fading into purple as the sun disappeared. She could hear her neighbors laughing across the street. Someone was playing music. Children were chasing each other barefoot, their giggles echoing through the air. Everything looked peaceful, but she felt something restless in her chest. She wanted to run, not away from home, but toward something bigger. She didn't want to grow up and look back wondering what could have happened if she had tried. Her family loved her, but they were practical people. They had lived the same way for generations, so when she mentioned her dream for the first time, they didn't cheer. Her father had put down his cup, stared at her for a long moment, and said, "It's not that we don't believe in you. It's just that this isn't the kind of life we have. That's for people with connections, money, and luck. Not us." Her mother, who rarely spoke against him, had nodded slowly and said, "We don't want to see you get hurt. It's better to choose something safe, something you know you can reach." Their words were meant to protect her, but they felt like a wall being built around her dreams. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy. She wanted to argue, to scream that she wasn't like everyone else, but she didn't. She stayed silent, letting the darkness swallow her thoughts. Days turned into weeks. She carried their words with her everywhere she went. But instead of killing the dream, it made it stronger. Every time someone reminded her of her limits, she silently whispered to herself, "I'll show you." One afternoon, she overheard two older neighbors talking while she passed by. "She really thinks she can do that," one said with a small laugh. "Poor girl. She'll learn the hard way. She should stop wasting time," the other replied. "It's better to accept your place than dream too big." She kept walking, pretending she didn't hear them. But their words cut deep. She walked faster, her hands clenched at her sides. By the time she reached the empty field behind the town, tears burned at the corners of her eyes. She sat down on the dry grass, looking up at the pale blue sky, and let the tears roll silently. She hated how much their words hurt. She hated how much she wanted to prove them wrong. That night she made a decision. If no one believed in her, she would believe in herself louder than all of them combined. She didn't know exactly where to start, but she knew she had to start somewhere. She borrowed old books, asked questions, and stayed up late at night when the rest of the house was asleep. Her room became her secret world, the only place where the words impossible didn't exist. Still, it wasn't easy. She often felt alone. There were days when the doubts crept in quietly. She would look at the mirror and wonder, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just fooling myself. But something inside her always pushed back. A small, stubborn voice whispered, keep going. At school, she began to notice how people looked at her differently. They saw her reading during lunch, staying late, asking questions no one else cared to ask. Some laughed behind her back. Some rolled their eyes. A few were curious but didn't dare to say anything. She learned to stop looking for approval. She wasn't doing this for them. She was doing this for herself. One rainy evening, she was walking home with her hood pulled tight over her head. The streets were quiet except for the soft tapping of rain on the ground. She stopped near a wall where the town posted announcements, job openings, school events, little things. A flyer caught her eye. It was about a program far away, something big, something she had only ever dreamed of. Her heart began to pound as she read the words. She folded the flyer and slipped it into her pocket like it was something precious. She didn't tell anyone about it. She wanted to keep this dream safe from careless laughter and tired advice. Over the next few weeks, she began working toward the opportunity in silence. It wasn't just about chasing the dream now. It was about proving to herself that she was capable. But the more she worked, the more people talked. She heard the whispers in the market, in the school hallway, even at home. She thinks she's better than us. She's wasting her time. She'll come running back when she fails. One evening, her uncle visited their home. He had lived in the town his whole life and knew everyone. Over dinner, he looked at her and said, I heard you're trying to do something big. Listen to me. I've seen people try. It never works. You should stop before you embarrass yourself. She didn't answer. She kept her eyes on her plate. But inside, her heart burned. She wanted to shout, I'm not like the others. But she didn't need to shout. She only needed to keep moving forward. Her small world was filled with doubt, but she was starting to build something stronger than their voices, a quiet fire that burned inside her. She realized no one would hand her the life she wanted. No one would believe in her dream unless she forced them to see it. She spent every extra hour working in silence. Some nights she was so tired her eyes burned, but she pushed through it. While others went to bed early, she stayed awake with books spread across her floor, papers filled with notes, and a small lamp flickering beside her. There were moments of fear, too. She feared failing. She feared being laughed at. She feared proving everyone right. But fear, strangely, became her fuel. Every time it rose, she worked a little harder. She reminded herself that even if no one saw it yet, this was her path. Then came the moment that would stay in her memory forever. It was late evening. She returned home from school to find her parents talking in low voices. When she stepped inside, the room grew quiet. Her father looked at her, sighed, and said softly, We just don't want you to get hurt. Dreams like this don't come true for people like us. I hope you understand. She didn't argue. She simply nodded and went to her room. She closed the door, leaned against it, and let a tear slip down her cheek. But unlike before, the tear didn't come from weakness. It came from strength. She knew what she was up against. She knew the world wouldn't hand her anything easily. She walked to the mirror, stared at her own reflection, and whispered to herself, I'll prove it. I'll prove every single one of you wrong. Outside, the night was quiet. The wind rustled through the trees. And in that silence, something changed. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a promise she had made to herself. A promise she would never break, no matter how many people told her it was impossible. And while the rest of the town fell asleep, she turned on her lamp once again and kept going. The days grew warmer as spring arrived in the town. Flowers peeked through cracks in the sidewalks, and the air smelled faintly of fresh rain and earth. The girl felt a strange energy in the air, too, as if the world itself was reminding her that life moved forward, whether people believed in her or not. She had made a decision long ago to chase her dream, but now she realized the journey would not just be about hope. It would be about action. She began each morning earlier than anyone else. While the town slowly woke up, she would sit at her small wooden desk, the lamp glowing softly, and open her books. She had started collecting knowledge wherever she could find it. Old textbooks, borrowed notes, online articles, even conversations with strangers she met on the street. All of it became part of her secret preparation. Her hands grew rough from writing, her eyes tired from reading, but she never complained. She was building something invisible to the world, and yet it felt as real as the air she breathed. Her teachers began to notice. Some were impressed by her determination. and would smile when she asked questions no one else thought to ask. Others seemed annoyed, thinking she was wasting time on things that wouldn't help her. But she didn't care about their judgment. She had learned to ignore the voices that tried to pull her down. At school, things weren't easy. Her classmates teased her sometimes. "Still reading those boring books?" one would ask, rolling her eyes. "Why don't you do something normal for once?" Another laughed. She tried to laugh with them sometimes to make it seem like their words didn't matter, but inside a fire burned brighter with every comment. Every word they said, every doubtful glance reminded her why she couldn't stop. She wanted to show them that persistence mattered more than talent alone, that determination could beat doubt. Her friends were few. Most people didn't understand her ambition, and many were intimidated by it. But she didn't need many friends, just a few who supported her quietly, who believed in her in their own way. One of them, a quiet boy who loved books as much as she did, would sometimes sit with her under the big tree behind the school. They would talk for hours, not just about homework, but about the dreams that seemed impossible to chase. He never laughed at her ideas. Instead, he would nod, ask questions, and offer advice. And though he never spoke loudly about it, his support became a hidden strength she carried every day. She faced the town's skepticism everywhere. At the market, people whispered when they saw her studying instead of helping her parents. At the library, some librarians shook their heads when she asked for rare books. Even in her family, she felt quiet resistance. Her parents loved her, but they worried constantly. Every time she stayed up late or left home to meet someone who could guide her, she could feel their silent disapproval. One afternoon, she stumbled across a flyer pinned to the town bulletin board. It was about a program far away, something she had only dreamed of. She read the details over and over, memorizing every requirement, every date, every instruction. The opportunity felt enormous and terrifying all at once. She didn't tell anyone. She tucked the flyer into her notebook and stared at it for hours, imagining what it would be like to be somewhere new, somewhere full of people who believed in possibilities instead of limits. She had to prepare. The program required skills and knowledge she didn't yet fully have. It would be hard, harder than anything she had attempted before. But she had learned one thing already. Fear could not control her. She worked quietly every evening, practicing, studying, and repeating exercises until her hands ached and her eyes burned. Every time she felt like stopping, she would think of the whispers of the town, of the neighbors who said she would fail. She would whisper to herself, "Not today, not ever." Her hard work didn't go unnoticed for long. One teacher, who had always been quiet and stern, asked her to stay after class one day. "I see how much effort you're putting in," the teacher said, voice low. "Most people your age would give up, but you keep going." "That's rare." Her heart swelled at the words. Rarely had anyone acknowledged her determination. She nodded shyly. I just want to try," she said softly. "Even if it's hard." The teacher smiled, almost like a secret was being shared. "Good, keep trying. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. You might surprise yourself." Those words stayed with her for days. They were a small light in the darkness of doubt. But even a small light can guide a person when the path is long and lonely. Her friends and family noticed some changes too. She walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and carried a quiet determination in her eyes. But for every person who admired her quietly, there were 3 who doubted, whispered, or laughed behind her back. People said she was wasting her youth, that she should focus on normal things, things that would guarantee safety and comfort. She didn't argue. She didn't even try to prove them wrong yet. She focused on the work, the skill, and the preparation. Proof would come later. Then came the day she failed for the first time in a way that truly shook her. She had been preparing for a small trial program, something that would measure if she was ready for the bigger opportunity. She had studied, practiced, and worked for months. But when the day came, nerves took over. She forgot details she had memorized, made mistakes she had never made before, and left the room feeling defeated. She walked home slowly, her bag heavy on her shoulders. Tears stung her eyes, and she felt every doubt she had tried to silence rush back. They were right, she thought bitterly. Maybe it is impossible. When she arrived at home, she didn't say a word. She went straight to her room and sat on the floor, hugging her knees. Hours passed. Rain tapped softly on her window. Her lamp was still glowing, the papers scattered across the desk like witnesses to her failure. For a long time she did nothing but stare at the walls, feeling the weight of disappointment crushing her. But as the night wore on, something inside shifted. She remembered every early morning, every late night, every whisper of doubt she had ever heard. She remembered the faces of people who had said she couldn't. And then she made a choice. She could let this failure define her, let it confirm what everyone else believed. Or she could use it as fuel to grow stronger. She wiped her tears and pulled her notebook closer. She began writing not just notes or plans, but a promise to herself. "I will not give up," she wrote, her hand trembling. "I will try again. I will learn. I will prove them wrong. I don't know how yet, but I will." The next morning she woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The failure still hurt, but it no longer felt like the end. It was a beginning, a lesson, a map, a guide. She spent the day reorganizing her study plan, correcting her mistakes and pushing herself harder. Every step became deliberate, every choice purposeful. She wasn't moving blindly anymore. She had direction. Her family noticed the change too. They saw the way she carried herself, the quiet focus in her eyes. They still worried, still reminded her to be careful. But they stopped trying to pull her back. Even her father, who had always been practical and protective, began to nod in quiet acknowledgement when she spoke of her plans. It wasn't encouragement yet. It wasn't cheering. But it was the first crack in the wall of doubt that surrounded her. Word of her efforts spread through the town slowly. Some people admired her silently. Some continued to whisper that she was chasing the impossible. But she didn't care. She had learned the most important lesson. The people who doubted her didn't matter. The only opinion that mattered was her own. Weeks turned into months. She continued to study, to practice, and to prepare. She sought help when she needed it, reading old books, asking teachers for advice, even writing letters to strangers who had achieved the things she wanted to do. Every bit of knowledge she gained became a stepping stone toward the bigger dream. Then one evening she sat under the big tree behind the school with her quiet friend. They watched the sky darken, stars slowly appearing one by one. "Do you think I can do it?" she asked, her voice soft. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "I think you can. I've seen how hard you work. I don't know anyone else who would keep going like this. You might surprise the world. And yourself." She smiled, a small, tired smile, but it felt strong. She knew the road ahead was far from easy. There would be more failures, more whispers, more nights when she felt completely alone. But she also knew something important. She was no longer afraid to keep going. The world around her might have been filled with doubt and disbelief, but she had found something stronger. She had found herself, and for the first time in a long time she felt ready. Spring had settled fully into the town, filling the air with warmth and life. Trees were thick with green leaves, flowers bloomed on every corner, and the streets buzzed with people going about their daily routines. Yet despite the cheerful season around her, she felt a tension she could not shake. It was the tension of ambition meeting reality, of hope meeting the first real test. After months of preparation, studying late into the night and pushing herself harder than anyone else in town, the day came for a major evaluation. It was a chance to prove that all her quiet efforts, all her secret practice and sleepless nights were not in vain. She had envisioned this day countless times. The careful walk to the venue, the focused calm before the challenge, the feeling of victory afterward. But reality, she quickly discovered, was far harsher than her imagination. The moment she entered the hall where the evaluation was held, a cold wave of nervousness swept over her. The room was filled with people she did not know, all of them looking calm and confident. Some glanced at her with curiosity. Others barely noticed her at all. She clutched her notes tightly, feeling the familiar fire of determination rise, but it mingled with a deep, gnawing fear. What if she failed? What if all the months of hard work were wasted? The evaluation began smoothly enough. She followed instructions carefully, relying on her preparation. At first, it seemed like she could do it. Her confidence grew slightly as she worked through the early tasks. She reminded herself, "I have done this before in my room, in my books, in my mind. I can do it here too," but then came the unexpected. A question, a problem, a challenge, something she had never anticipated appeared. Her mind, so carefully trained, blanked. Her hands trembled slightly, her chest tightened, and a moment of panic swept through her. She tried to remember her preparation. Tried to recall the hours she had spent practicing, but the words, the formulas, the steps, they all slipped through her mind like sand through fingers. Time passed faster than she realized. She stumbled, hesitated, and made mistakes she had never imagined. When she finally walked out of the hall, her heart heavy, she knew she had failed. She felt hollow, empty, as though every effort she had made for months had dissolved into nothing. The walk home was unbearable. Rain had started to fall softly, as if the world itself mourned her disappointment. She held her bag tightly, tears threatening to spill over, but she refused to cry in public. People passed by, unaware of the storm raging inside her. She felt every whisper she had ever heard, every doubting glance from the town echoing in her mind. They were right. I can't do this. I'm not enough. When she reached home, she didn't speak. She left her bag in the corner, sat on the floor of her room, and pressed her face into her hands. The walls seemed to close in around her. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully feel the pain of failure. It was a sharp, raw kind of hurt, the kind that makes you question everything you believe about yourself. Her parents knocked softly on her door, their voices gentle. "Are you all right?" her mother asked. "Do you want to talk?" She shook her head, unable to form words. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort, but it only reminded her how alone she felt in this battle no one else understood. She didn't want pity, advice, or lectures. She wanted to succeed. She wanted to prove herself. But right now, all she could feel was the weight of defeat. For the next few days, she moved like a shadow. She went through the motions of life, went to school, completed her chores, and nodded politely to anyone who spoke to her. But inside, she felt broken. Even her quiet friend noticed the change. One afternoon, he came by her house, sitting beside her on the old wooden steps outside. "You're quiet," he said softly. "You've been quiet since the evaluation. Are you all right?" She stared at the ground. "I failed," she whispered. "I worked so hard and it didn't matter. I can't do it. I'm not good enough." He said nothing for a moment, letting her words settle. Then he finally spoke. "Failure, it hurts. I know it does. But failing once doesn't mean you're not capable. It means you need to try differently. You're not giving up, are you?" She shook her head slowly, though her heart was still heavy. I don't know. It feels impossible now. That's what everyone else thinks too," he said quietly. "But you don't have to think like them. You've come so far. One setback doesn't erase that." His words stayed with her, though they didn't magically heal the pain. She spent long hours alone, thinking about everything she had done, every moment she had sacrificed, every whisper of doubt she had heard. And slowly she began to see something. The failure didn't erase her efforts. It didn't take away the months of preparation. It didn't diminish the fire inside her. Instead, it showed her that the path she had chosen was not simple. The dream she wanted was not easy. It was meant to test her, to push her harder, to see if she truly believed in herself. And deep down she realized she did. She could not let this one setback define her. The first step was small. She picked up her books again. She went back to the notes she had written, the exercises she had practiced, and reviewed every mistake she had made during the evaluation. She analyzed everything carefully, identifying what went wrong, what she could improve, and what she needed to focus on next. For hours she worked silently, letting frustration fuel her focus instead of defeat. Her family noticed the change slowly. She didn't speak much about her failure, but they could see she was determined to continue. Her father, who had always been skeptical, stopped mentioning the practical path he wished she would take. Her mother, though still worried, allowed her to stay late in her room studying without interruption. Even her quiet friend noticed a light return to her eyes, though it was tempered by the memory of her recent failure. The town, of course, did not forget. Gossip traveled quickly. "She failed," some whispered. "I told you she couldn't do it. She's wasting her time. Maybe she should give up now before it's too embarrassing." She overheard these words sometimes, but they no longer crushed her. Instead, they became fuel. Every whisper, every doubting glance reminded her why she could not give up. She worked harder than ever before, not because she wanted approval, but because she owed it to herself. She wanted to show herself first and everyone else second. Then came the turning point. One evening, she was revising a particularly difficult section of her study material when she realized she understood it in a new way. It wasn't just repetition or memorization anymore. She could see the patterns, the connections, the logic behind it. She felt a rush of excitement, a spark she hadn't felt in weeks. She spent hours testing herself, practicing, correcting mistakes she hadn't noticed before. And for the first time since her failure, she felt capable again. She began to believe not just in the dream, but in herself. The journey had been harsh, but it was shaping her. She was learning resilience, patience, and determination in ways she had never imagined. She knew the road ahead would have more obstacles, but she also knew she was no longer the same girl who had stared at the evaluation in fear. She had grown stronger, smarter, and more determined. Her confidence returned gradually. She started helping others in small ways, sharing what she had learned with classmates who struggled. Some were surprised by her willingness to teach, others inspired. She realized that even in the face of failure, there was an opportunity to give and grow. And with each day, her preparation became sharper, more focused, and more deliberate. She also began to dream again, but this time, differently. She dreamed not of a smooth path, not of immediate success, but of persistence, growth, and triumph after hardship. The fear that had once frozen her now pushed her forward. She knew the next challenge would be difficult, but she also knew she would meet it head-on. She would not run. She would not hide. She would rise. And though the town still whispered and doubted, she no longer listened. Their words could not touch the fire burning inside her anymore. She had faced failure, stared it in the eyes, and chosen to keep going. And in that choice, she discovered the first taste of true power. The power to decide her own path, the power to define her own worth, and the power to prove that impossible is only a word. As the sun set on another long day, she sat by the window in her small room, a notebook open in front of her, pen in hand. Outside, the sky glowed with orange and pink streaks, the town quiet except for distant laughter and the hum of evening life. She paused, looking out at the horizon, and whispered to herself, "I'm not done. This is just the beginning." And in the quiet of that moment, she felt it, a deep, unshakable certainty that she would rise again. She would face the next challenge. She would push harder. And one day she would prove not just to the town, not just to her family, but to herself, that she was capable of more than anyone had ever imagined. The months that followed her failure were some of the hardest she had ever lived. Every day she pushed herself in ways she had never imagined, learning to control fear, doubt, and exhaustion. The town continued with its usual rhythm, unaware of the quiet storm of effort and determination happening in her small room, under the soft glow of her lamp. People whispered, people laughed, people shook their heads, but she no longer paid attention. She had begun to live in her own world of purpose, where only effort, growth, and persistence mattered. Finally, the day came for the next major opportunity. She had prepared for months, studied tirelessly, and rehearsed every possible scenario. She felt nervous, yes, but this time it was different. It was a nervousness born not of fear, but of anticipation. She had faced failure before, and she had survived. She had faced doubt before, and she had grown stronger. And now she was ready. The morning was cool and bright. She woke up early, dressed carefully, and ate a quiet breakfast. Her parents watched her with silent concern. They didn't say much, only exchanged glances, but she could sense the worry in their eyes. She smiled at them softly. "I'll be okay," she said, not knowing if they truly believed her, but knowing she believed herself. The journey to the venue was long. She walked through streets that were now familiar yet suddenly strange, as if she were seeing them through the eyes of someone determined to change her life. Every step reminded her of the months of preparation, the nights of studying, the sacrifices she had made, and the doubts she had faced. She remembered the whispers, "You can't do it. You'll fail. It's impossible." And she carried those words like a torch, letting them fuel her determination instead of crushing it. When she arrived, the hall was full of people she had never seen before. Some looked confident, others seemed nervous like her. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was her moment, not theirs. She signed in quietly and waited, her heart pounding, her hands trembling slightly. But beneath the nervousness was a deep, steady fire she had been nurturing for months. She could feel it now, alive and strong, ready to guide her through whatever came next. The challenge began, and immediately she noticed something remarkable. This time her preparation worked. When difficult tasks appeared, she didn't panic. She relied on the skills she had honed, the knowledge she had built, and the countless hours she had spent practicing in secret. When a question seemed impossible, she reminded herself to break it down, step by step, and suddenly it didn't feel so impossible anymore. Time moved quickly. The day passed in a blur of focus, concentration, and effort. She could feel the weight of every moment, but she carried it with quiet confidence. She remembered every failure she had faced, every whisper of doubt, every long night alone with her books. Each one had prepared her for this moment. And then, it happened. The final challenge appeared, a problem that seemed insurmountable at first glance. Her heart raced, her hands shook, but she didn't stop. She breathed deeply, recalling the strategies she had practiced over and over, and slowly, methodically, she began to work. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat formed on her forehead. Her mind screamed, her body ached, but she pushed forward. Step by step, piece by piece, she solved what had seemed impossible. When the final moment came, she leaned back slightly, heart pounding, and realized she had done it. She had completed the challenge. She had faced the moment everyone had said she would fail, and she had conquered it. A wave of emotion hit her. Relief, joy, disbelief. She had imagined this moment so many times, but nothing had prepared her for the intensity of actually living it. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she didn't try to hide them. She had earned this. She had fought for this. And now, she could finally feel the taste of triumph. When the results were announced, the room fell silent. The person in charge read names one by one, and finally her name was called. She stepped forward slowly, still catching her breath. The applause was unexpected at first. Some faces in the room were shocked. Others smiled genuinely. She accepted the recognition quietly, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction that words could never capture. Outside the hall, people waited. Some she knew, many she didn't. A few of the same townspeople who had whispered doubts months before stood nearby, their expressions unreadable. She could feel their eyes on her, some filled with surprise, some with admiration, and perhaps a few with regret. She didn't seek their approval. She only felt the quiet pride of someone who had refused to give up, someone who had proved not just to others but to herself that determination could beat doubt. Her quiet friend found her after the announcement, his eyes wide with amazement. "You did it," he said softly, almost as if he couldn't believe it. "I knew you could, but I didn't realize it would be like this. You're incredible." She smiled at him, exhausted but elated. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "I failed before, I almost gave up, but I kept going." He nodded. "That's what makes this real. Not the victory, but everything you did to get here. You earned it." The ride home was surreal. The town looked the same as always, but she saw it differently now. Every street, every corner, every familiar face carried new meaning. She realized that life wasn't about waiting for people to believe in you. It was about believing in yourself, even when the world said you couldn't. When she entered her house, her parents were waiting. Their faces showed pride, surprise, and perhaps a little disbelief. Her father's voice shook slightly as he said, We didn't know you could." He trailed off, unsure of what words could capture his feelings. Her mother reached out and hugged her tightly. "We're so proud of you," she whispered. "You worked so hard. You never gave up, even when it seemed impossible. We see it now." She hugged them back, tears streaming down her face. The warmth of their embrace felt different this time. It was not the cautious worry of before, but genuine pride, a recognition that she had proven not just herself but everyone else wrong. Word spread through the town quickly. People came to congratulate her, some quietly, some openly. She noticed the same neighbors who had once whispered doubts now offering smiles, handshakes, and kind words. Some apologized for underestimating her. Others simply nodded, acknowledging her achievement without saying much. But it didn't matter what they thought anymore. What mattered was the fire inside her that had carried her through months of doubt, failure, and exhaustion. What mattered was the voice she had cultivated, the voice that said, "You can, you will, you are capable." That night, she sat by the window in her room, looking out at the quiet town below. The stars were bright, twinkling in the dark sky like Tiny reminders that the world held possibilities beyond imagination. She thought about the journey she had taken, the nights of studying alone, the whispers of doubt, the taste of failure, and now the taste of victory. She realized that this moment was not just about one achievement. It was about everything she had learned along the way. Resilience, patience, courage, the strength to keep going even when the world said no. And she understood that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles, more people who doubted. But she had proven to herself that nothing was impossible when determination burned bright. Her quiet friend visited her once more that evening, bringing a small notebook as a gift. "For your next adventure," he said with a smile. She laughed softly, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I think I'm ready," she replied. "No matter what comes next, I know I can face it." Outside, the town slept, unaware of the storm that had passed and the triumph that had risen from it. Inside, in the small room lit by a single lamp, a young woman sat quietly, filled with a sense of accomplishment, hope, and unshakable belief in herself. She had faced the impossible and emerged victorious, and for the first time she allowed herself to dream even bigger. The victory she had achieved was still fresh, glowing like embers in her chest. People talked about it, shared the news, and the town slowly began to understand that the quiet girl they had once doubted had done something extraordinary. But for her, the real triumph was not in the applause or the recognition. It was in the journey itself. She had faced failure, battled doubt, and refused to give up. That knowledge, the awareness of her own strength, was more valuable than any award or certificate. Life slowly returned to a new kind of normal. She continued to work, study, and practice, but now her efforts had a different flavor. They were not just about preparation or proving herself. They were about growth, exploration, and the endless pursuit of better versions of herself. She realized that achievement was not a single moment, but a path, a series of choices, mistakes, and lessons that built a person step by step. Her family, who had once worried so much, now supported her quietly, but fully. Her father, who had been practical and cautious, began to nod more often when she spoke of her plans. Her mother, who had always been protective, smiled with genuine pride when she saw the determination in her eyes. Even the neighbors who had once doubted her whispered words of encouragement now, though some still struggled to believe it. One afternoon, she walked through the town square and noticed how differently she saw it. The same streets, the same houses, and the same people seemed smaller now, not because they had changed, but because she had grown. Every step reminded her that she had not only conquered a challenge, but had expanded her own horizon. She was no longer limited by the walls others had tried to place around her dreams. She began to share her experience quietly with those who were willing to listen. At first it was small, talking to her quiet friend under the big tree, explaining how she had prepared, how she had failed, and how she had kept going. She spoke of the late nights, the tears, the exhaustion, and the small victories that had kept her moving forward. People began to notice, and slowly, her story spread. Other young people in the town who had once believed their dreams were out of reach began to seek her advice. They came to her with questions, doubts, and fears, and she listened patiently, offering guidance, encouragement, and hope. She told them, "It's not easy. You will fail. People will doubt you. But if you keep going step by step, you can achieve what seems impossible." It wasn't long before the story reached those who had doubted her the most. Some of the same neighbors who had whispered that she would fail came to see her. They were quiet at first, hesitant, unsure how to acknowledge what had happened, but they could not ignore it. The girl who had been called naive, foolish, or too ambitious had achieved something remarkable, and even though some still struggled with their own disbelief, they could not deny the truth. She understood that the journey was bigger than herself now. Her victory was a message, a proof that determination, courage, and resilience could triumph over doubt. She wanted to make sure that others understood this too. She visited schools, small community gatherings, and even the local library to speak about her experience. She told students to dream, to work hard, and to never let the voice of doubt whether from others or themselves, define their path. Everywhere she went, she noticed the change. Faces that had once carried skepticism now held curiosity, admiration, and sometimes awe. Young girls and boys asked her questions, wanting to know how they could follow a similar path. Parents approached her quietly, asking how they could support their children's dreams. And she shared, always humbly, always emphasizing that nothing came without effort, sacrifice, and belief. But even as her story spread, she never forgot the quiet nights in her room, the tears, the moments of despair, and the fear that had once held her back. Those experiences were the foundation of her strength. She knew that success was not just about talent or luck. It was about endurance, persistence, and a refusal to give up when the world says no. One evening, she returned home from a speaking event and found her parents sitting in the kitchen. They looked at her with a mixture of pride and wonder. "We always knew you were strong," her father said softly. "But seeing what you've done, it's beyond what we imagined." Her mother reached across the table, holding her hand. "You have shown everyone, including us, that nothing is impossible if you don't give up. We're proud, but more than that, we're inspired." For the first time, she truly felt the depth of her accomplishment. It wasn't just about achieving her dream. It was about inspiring others, proving to the world and herself that the impossible was only a word. She realized that her journey had transformed not just her, but the people around her, even in a small, quiet town. The quiet friend who had supported her from the beginning continued to be by her side. They would often sit under the big tree, talking about dreams, plans, and possibilities. "You've changed everything," he said one evening. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who thought this town had limits." She smiled, thinking about how far she had come. "It wasn't easy," she said. "I failed so many times. I cried, I felt like giving up. But I kept going. That's what made the difference. And now you're showing others the way," he replied. Exactly. She had learned that success was not just a personal achievement, it was a responsibility. To keep going, to keep dreaming, and to show others that belief in oneself could move mountains. She began mentoring more children and teenagers, helping them understand that they could push past fear, failure, and doubt. One day, she walked through the town square and noticed a young girl sitting alone on a bench, looking worried and uncertain. She approached her gently and sat beside her. The girl looked up, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Do you think I can do it?" she asked. The young woman smiled, thinking back to all the moments she had asked herself the same question. "I know you can," she said firmly. "It won't be easy. You might fail sometimes. People might doubt you. But if you keep trying, step by step, you will get there. I promise." The girl's eyes brightened and a small smile appeared. For the young woman, this was the real reward. Not the applause, not the recognition, not even the victories she had achieved. It was the knowledge that she could help someone else believe in themselves. That the fire she had cultivated in herself could ignite the spark in others. Her story continued to grow beyond the town. People from neighboring communities began to hear about the girl who had been told it was impossible and had proved everyone wrong. Letters arrived from faraway places, messages from people seeking advice, encouragement, or inspiration. She responded to everyone patiently, knowing the value of hope, belief, and persistence, and yet she remained grounded. She never let recognition make her arrogant, never let success make her complacent. She remembered every moment of struggle, every tear, every whisper of doubt. Those moments were her foundation. They reminded her that dreams were not given, they were earned. They reminded her that failure was not the end, it was the beginning of growth. Years later, she would look back on that time and smile. She would remember the girl who sat alone under the big tree, the quiet nights in her room, the whispers of doubt, and the taste of failure. And she would remember the first moment she realized she could do it, the first time she conquered what seemed impossible. She understood something crucial. The real victory was never just achieving a dream. The real victory was in discovering her own strength, in proving to herself that she could rise no matter what the world said. That was the moment she truly became unstoppable. And in the hearts of the people she inspired, the young children, the quiet teens, even the skeptical neighbors, the story lived on. A story of courage, resilience, and the power of never giving up. A story that whispered to everyone who had ever been told, "It's impossible," that the impossible was never real. She had proved it. And she knew deep down that anyone could do the same if they were willing to try, willing to fail, willing to rise again. Her journey was over in one sense. It had reached its first triumph, but in another, it was only beginning. There would always be new dreams, new challenges, new doubts, and she would face them all quietly, steadily, and bravely. She had learned that success was not a destination. It was a path. And on that path she had discovered the most important truth of all. The strength to believe in oneself could move the world. As night fell over the town, the lights twinkling softly in the distance, she sat by her window once more. Her notebook lay open in front of her, filled with notes, dreams, and reflections. She smiled to herself, feeling a quiet pride that went deeper than words. She had been told it was impossible. She had been doubted, whispered about, and discouraged. But she had proven them all wrong. And now she knew one thing for certain: nothing could ever stop her again. Life after her first major success was not quiet. In fact, it was busier, more demanding, and full of opportunities she had only dreamed about before. People from outside the town began reaching out, offering guidance, mentorship, and chances to grow further. She had moved from being the quiet girl who studied alone under her lamp to someone who carried a sense of responsibility, not just for herself but for everyone who believed in her or who needed hope. The transition wasn't easy. She had to learn how to manage her time, how to balance her dreams with practical demands, and how to handle the expectations of people who now looked up to her. Some days it felt overwhelming. She would wake up early, often before sunrise, to study or work on new projects. Then she would attend meetings, respond to letters, mentor others, and continue her personal training. Her energy was tested like never before, but she had learned from her previous struggles that persistence always mattered more than comfort. She traveled to places she had only imagined in her books. She met people who were experts in their fields, individuals whose achievements seemed untouchable before. And yet she did not let herself feel intimidated. She remembered the long nights, the whispered doubts, and the failures she had faced in her small town. Those memories were now her anchor, reminding her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to act in spite of it. Everywhere she went, she shared her story. At conferences, workshops, and small classrooms, she told people about the girl who had been told it's impossible and had refused to listen. She spoke of failure, of doubt, of the long hours of preparation and study. She emphasized that no one achieves great things without facing obstacles. People listened, some with skepticism, some with awe, but many left inspired. And she realized something profound. Her journey was no longer just about her dreams. It had become a beacon for others. Even in her hometown, life began to change subtly. Children who once thought their dreams were too big began to pursue them with courage. Parents started to listen when their children spoke about ambitions that seemed far away. Teachers encouraged students to try even when it was difficult. She had ignited a spark, not through force but through example. Her success showed everyone that the impossible was often only a story people told themselves. But with growth came new challenges. As her influence expanded, so did the pressure. Expectations grew, and she faced moments of doubt she hadn't anticipated. There were times when projects didn't work out, when plans fell through, or when criticism from strangers felt harsh. The whispers she had once known in her town had multiplied and traveled farther, sometimes appearing in unexpected forms: emails, social media messages, or casual conversations she overheard. At first it was hard. She remembered the fear she had felt before the first evaluation. She could feel the panic rising again, the old doubt whispering that she might fail. But this time she did something different. She reminded herself of the long journey that had brought her here, the failures she had survived, the determination she had cultivated. She learned that success was not the absence of fear or challenge. It was the ability to keep going despite them.